Okay, so welcome back to session 4. We're going to be discussing the flowers for what Dr. Edward Bache referred to as a lack of interest in the present. And as I said back in session 1, this kind of represents a lot of different stories and relationships with emotions, etc., that people have that present in a similar way. They're just not quite here in the present moment. They're not deriving a great deal of joy from the present moment. There are lots of reasons for that. So, one way that people describe this lack of interest in the present, living in the present, focused on the here and now, is to talk about grounding. So, to talk about not really being in their body in this moment. And grounding can come across as people who aren't really connected to what's practical in life. So those people who regularly miss appointments because they're not focused on the time of day. They forget lunch, for example. They're not connected to their physical body. And there are lots and lots of grounding exercises that can be done, and sometimes they can be really useful when using flowers from this subgroup. So I'd like you to take a moment and think of some of those grounding activities that perhaps you've tried, that you've heard of, or if you've never heard of this concept before, that maybe you go out and do a little bit of research and find out what do people do to ground and do their work. Can I use them in times when I feel like I'm just not quite present, I'm not quite focused, I'm not quite here? So the first flower is clematis or clematis, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And clematis is a flower for the daydreamers of the world. It is the flower of when people much prefer to be off in their own world, off in their own realm, dreaming of the future, dreaming of somewhere they'd rather be, dreaming about anything but what's happening in the here and now. And whilst we all daydream, and whilst that's an important part of the creative process, when it is all the time, when it is all consuming, when you miss the day-to-day joy in life and the day-to-day practicalities in life, then it starts to become an issue and a problem. And so clematis types are constantly thinking of how much better life should be. Daydreaming of something much bigger and better than what they've created. And as a consequence, don't give any energy or thought to what's required in order to achieve that goal. So it's less that they're using daydreaming as a way to think of the bigger picture and then move toward it. It's a way to escape from doing what's necessary, putting in the hard yards to get to where you're wanting to be. And so the lesson of clematis or clematis then is to start to move those thoughts into action. Start to find really practical ways to get those incredibly big visions down into small manageable steps that will lead to that happiness. And it also helps people to be realistic and down to earth. So you can have big visions, but there also needs to be in the balance of what is realistically achievable with your abilities, with your talents, with your drives, and how will that big picture dream really serve you? Will it actually bring happiness? So it is taking those dreams and starting to pull them apart and kind of checking them for flaws and holes and checking them to see if it's achievable, and then breaking it down so that it is achievable. And this is a skill set that some people simply don't have, they were never taught, and some people avoid, because if you make a decision, then you lose out on other things. And also, if you chase after a goal and it doesn't work out, then that is the potential for depression, sadness, disappointment, failure, all of these things. It was there's a very funny saying that says it's better to not try and not fail, rather than trying something, failing, picking yourself back up, dusting yourself off, becoming realistic about your goals, setting new goals and going through that whole process, and not being disillusioned in the process. And that's a tough thing that people do every single day, and for some people that is quite scary, that is quite terrifying, that invokes fear, and so living off in a dream world is a nice option. So this is about taking responsibility and learning the steps that are necessary in order to bring about what will make you actually happy, and to stay grounded in the process. Isn't this a gorgeous picture? This is a honeysuckle, which, when you look at it from a doctrine of signatures point of view, to me, it looks like it's a hand reaching out and kind of grabbing. And honeysuckle, it's dripping with sweet, juicy, sticky nectar that's kind of really enticing, and can be a bit heady and kind of quite sticky. And honeysuckle is all about being stuck. It's about being stuck in the past, though. So it's like that heady scent is a trance that kind of lures you into this way of thinking that the past is, looking at the past through rose-colored glasses, that everything was wonderful before this present moment, that the past is connected to happiness and joy and peacefulness and whatever that person really resonates with and is really happy about. And it's usually a selective memory, so all the bad things kind of get washed aside. And when they're compared to current reality, the current reality is depressing, or a heavy burden, or they don't feel like they fit in, or it's not a happy place to be. And so the focus is always on the past, where there's either homesickness or nostalgia, or pining for a love that is lost, for example. So honeysuckle, the positive outcome of it is to bring that energy, bring that focus to the present day, and to recognize the total joy that can be found in the moment. And that whilst the past was valuable and important and got you to where you are now, it is just that, the past, and the focus of energy, the focus of your time, if placed in the present, can bring the same levels of joy and happiness. So this is a flower of letting go of regrets, moving forward. It's also a flower of being happy in the present moment, for choosing happiness in the present moment, and recognizing that it's a choice, more importantly, that it is a choice to see something like growing old as a source of happiness and joy, rather than everything was better when I was younger and I had my health and blah blah blah. That constant thought pattern is just going to keep on perpetuating this idea of depression in the present moment, and that everything in this present moment is rubbish and sucks and is not going to at all bring happiness, and that the past was my only source of happiness. For the rest of my life, that's it. I've kind of used up my happiness. And it's certainly an emotive state that you find in clinic. And maybe just take a moment to think about a time when perhaps you felt homesickness, or you felt that connection with the past as being so much better than the present moment, or perhaps you've met someone that's in that honeysuckle state, and just take a moment to really think about them as I read you this quote from Dr. Bache. This is the remedy to remove from the mind the regrets and sorrows of the past, to counteract all influences, all wishes and desires of the past, and to bring us back into the present. And I think that beautifully sums up this flower. And wild rose. This, we did this in the Doctrine of Signatures, if you remember. We talked about the pink colour as being the higher heart, often associated with maternal love, and by maternal love I don't mean that you have to be female to feel it or resonate with it. I mean that nurturing love, that warm hug, you know, that sort of feeling of being safe and nurtured and protected from a very gentle, kind of almost feminine place, if that makes sense, rather than the nurturing, protecting, kind of all-encompassing, more masculine space. This is a softening, a space that you kind of relax into. And then we had a double Doctrine of Signatures where the shape of the petal is also in the shape of a heart. Well, certainly what we draw is a heart, not the physical heart. And so this essence is kind of enabling people to tap into that gentle love space. And it's that softening and that opening and the strength that space gives you that helps to move through the resignation and apathy that this flower is actually for. So wild rose is for kind of giving up, yeah? It's for when you feel withdrawn to a situation, where you're resigned to a situation. This is always going to be the way that it is and nothing will change it. And there's a feeling of being too apathetic, that there's no real point in changing things, so why would I go about trying to improve my situation? Why would I go about trying to take the steps necessary to move out of this situation? It's always going to be the way that it is. And perhaps you've heard people say this before. You know, there's no point in trying because it just is what it is. And it's a really defeatist kind of place to come from. It's an almost like a victim space to come from. And sometimes it can be really hard to shift, particularly if it's a learned pattern of behavior that's been reinforced by the way that they view life and the situations that they find themselves in because of this apathy and resignation to life. So this is really about renewing passion, renewing inner joy, renewing vitality, renewing enthusiasm, and renewing ambition. I really like that focus in the positive outcomes. It's to recognize that ambition doesn't have to be a negative, terrible, aggressive thing. It can simply mean, I know what my wants and needs are. I know what my strengths are. I know what I have to offer to the world, and I'm going to offer it no matter what knockbacks I have, no matter what setbacks happen. I'm going to keep on my path. I'm going to keep true to who I am. Now, that's ambition. It's also, of course, about taking responsibility for life. So when I talked about kind of that resignation and apathy can move you into a victim-like stance where there is seemingly no way out of the situation. This flower can help to change that view, change that mindset, help you to see that that is just a way of looking at the world. It's not really real. And that we can just as easily come from an empowered state, come from a state where we take responsibility for the lives that we've created and the choices that we make. And we are kind of in reality of the circumstances that we're in, and we make the changes, we take the steps. And it's a huge leap of faith that's required to do this. This is a flower that, all of that nurturing love, in the same way that a mother eventually needs to kind of push its babies out of the nest in order to get them to fly, or take the ducklings, taking them down to the water and kind of pushing them in and watching them swim. It's that nurturing love that is required here in order to push this individual to make a change, because that stagnant victim state can be kind of really solidifying for a lot of people. And so this is an incredible catalytic kind of flower, despite being nurturing, despite being loving, despite being kind of that all-encompassing hug. And you can initiate change in both ways. You can kind of be forceful about it, or you can be loving and tender about it. It doesn't mean that it ends up being any less strong in its response. So wild rose is really useful for when people have just kind of accepted a diagnosis, and sometimes it's a medical diagnosis, and sometimes it's a diagnosis they've made up all on their own. So they've just accepted that that's their lot in life, and there's really no point in doing anything about it. It's just is what it is, and I might as well just lay in bed for the rest of my days. There is also a tendency for wild rose types to withdraw from life in general. So when you ask them questions about what do you do for fun, that can sometimes be a really interesting question to ask a wild rose type. They're generally lacking motivation, and are generally dispirited, lacking the drive that's required in order to persevere through difficult times. And this may be something that you combine with other flowers that we've done to date for that sense of there's no point to even trying.